You might think that after cooking with salt for thousands of years, we wouldn't have all that much left to learn, but that is not the case. The more we tinker with salt, the more we stumble upon its seemingly boundless potential. I personally love all things salt, but there are 5 unique uses for it that I think every cook should know. We're gonna talk about how salt can make vegetables cook faster, preserve fresh herbs so you never waste them, chill foods rapidly, make the creamiest, best beans you've ever had, and perfect your morning coffee and your evening cocktail. Man, salt has a pretty impressive resume. You're hired. The salt we know and love and sprinkle on steaks, popcorn, and well, everything is sodium chloride, one of the most abundant and vital minerals on Earth. But while the two halves of the ionic compound might seem inseparable, they can and do split when salt is dissolved back into water, and each has special powers of its own. Chloride ions do most of the work when it comes to tenderizing lean meats during brining, and sodium ions, well, let's get right to one of their superpowers. One of the first lessons I learned in culinary school was that if you're blanching vegetables, you want the water to be as salty as the sea. But here's the thing, the sea is really salty, between 3 and 4% salinity. Almost no one uses that much salt when it comes to cooking vegetables, but it turns out they should. As food science writer Harold McGee explains in his indispensable tome On Food and Cooking, blanching vegetables in super salty water not only seasons them thoroughly, but also makes them cook faster. That's right, the intense salty water actually tenderizes them more quickly, which means they take less time to cook and retain their bright green color. Check out this experiment. I cooked 2 batches of green beans until they were tender in 2 different saltwater concentrations. This first batch took about 12 minutes to turn tender in water with about 1% salt. And as you can see, the bean is olive green drab. But this bean from the other batch, which I cooked in a 4% saltwater solution for about 7 minutes, is equally tender and so much brighter green. And no, this bean is not too salty. Because it cooks faster, it has less time to absorb salt, and some of the salt washes off when we shock the beans in an ice bath. They really just taste more green beany. Here's why this works. Cell walls in plants are held together by pectin, which acts like a sort of glue. And that glue is strengthened by calcium ions, which are also in the beans. When we cook beans or other vegetables in salt water, some of the sodium ions in the salt displace some of the calcium ions so that the vegetables soften easily. The saltier the water, the faster they'll soften, and the more beautifully bright green they'll be when they're done. Here's our handy saltwater formula. For every quart of water, add 2 tablespoons of table salt. That's 960 grams of water to 46 grams of salt. This trick will make blanched vegetables shine on a crudité spread. But one of my favorite ways to show off perfectly crisp, tender, bright green beans is this vibrant salad with cherry tomatoes and feta. We'll toss our blanched beans with halved cherry tomatoes, chopped fresh mint and parsley, lemon juice, and a little salt and pepper. Then we just transfer it to a serving platter and sprinkle it with crumbled feta. The grassy sweet beans, tangy tomatoes, fresh herbs, and that ripe dairy richness of the feta work so well together. Yum, yum, yum. Okay, next up, we tackle food waste. I love fresh herbs, and I hate how often they turn wet and soggy in my fridge. It's a bummer on every level. And salt can make it a thing of the past. Enter herb finishing salts. Making them is an easy way to use up heaps of herbs and preserve their lovely flavor in one fell swoop. And they're such a treat to have on hand for topping popcorn, meat, and fish, or even rimming a cocktail glass. And they make great gifts too if you pack them into pretty jars. I love this method because it's almost entirely hands-off. Salt and thyme, that's T-I-M-E, not the herb, do pretty much all of the work, drawing moisture out of the herbs via osmosis. It doesn't even require heat, so the herbs become shelf-stable without losing their volatile aroma compounds. Check out how easy this is. I've got 1 cup of fresh dill here and a half a cup of Malden flake salt, which we love for its delicate crunch, but any nice sea salt or even diamond crystal kosher salt works fine. All you do is finely chop the dill, mix it with the salt, and spread the mixture out on a baking sheet lined with parchment paper. We'll let it sit for 36 to 48 hours at room temperature, out of direct sunlight. Every 12 hours, you want to stir the mixture so that the herbs dry evenly. And when it's done, you rub the mixture between your hands to break up any clumps. And that's it. They keep for 2 months, so think of these around the holidays when you want to get your DIY gifting prep done early. Or just keep them around for movie night popcorn like I do. Nothing goes better with herby popcorn than a chilled glass of wine, right? Look, just say yes. I need help with this transition. We've all been there. You invite friends over and realize you forgot to chill your wine. You all end up tossing ice cubes in the glass, and we all laugh about it. But deep down, we're sad. because we know the wine is suffering big time. But what's the alternative? Stashing the bottle in the freezer can take the better part of an hour to drop the wine's temperature down to the 50-degree target. An ice bath works faster, but we can do even better than that. Enter our main character, salt. Adding salt to an ice bath will make it significantly colder as it lowers the freezing point of water. And you can harness that additional cooling power for faster chilling. Check out this experiment. The formula I use is 1 pound of ice, a half a cup of diamond crystal kosher salt, and a third of a cup of water. If you're using grams, that's 450 grams of ice, 80 grams of salt, and 80 grams of water. And I've tripled the formula to fill this Bain Marie. In the other, I've got an equal amount of unsalted ice and water. We pop identical bottles of room temperature white wine with temperature probes in each, and we'll see how long it takes for the wines to hit our target of 50 degrees. Notice that I'm agitating the bottles, which constantly refreshes the water that is touching the bottle with colder water. With or without salt, agitation will always speed up chilling. Okay, this bottle in the salty ice bath got down to 46 degrees in about 10 minutes, and the bath itself it hit 18 degrees. That's very cold. Look how frosty the Bain Marie itself got. Now compare that to the regular ice bath. After 10 minutes, the wine is still 60 degrees, and the ice bath itself is 32 degrees. Now this is just for demonstration purposes, and you can actually chill wine even faster. Our senior science research editor, Paul Adams, has gotten the job done in 7 minutes flat without salting the ice water by laying the bottle down on its side in a long storage container filled with an ice bath and circulating the water with an aquarium pump. But if for some strange reason you don't have the tools for that setup, salting the ice bath is the way to go. A salted ice bath is a great way to rapidly lower the temperature of other beverages like iced tea, soups or stews destined for the freezer, and raw meat that you want to freeze as quickly as possible to prevent the formation of large ice crystals that could damage its texture. And there you have it, my favorite party trick. Now, nothing goes better with chilled wine than a pot of lovely creamy beans. Okay, even I'll admit that one was a little bit of a stretch. But I love this tip. Now, this is similar science to our first lesson on blanching green vegetables in that sodium ions are replacing calcium ions in the bean skins. This weakens the pectin, so the skins are more tender. But with dry beans, we come at it from a different angle, and that angle is brining. First, I just want to make clear that salt does not make beans tough. That's a myth that needs to go away right now. On the contrary, brining dried beans instead of just soaking them in plain water helps them cook up intact but still tender and creamy. That's because the brined, more tender bean skins can stretch as the bean's starchy interior absorbs water and swells during cooking. Think of it like giving your beans stretchy pants instead of jeans. Without that stretchiness, the skins rupture like little water balloons that burst when you fill them up too much. Check out this experiment. I've got 2 pounds of dried red kidney beans that I soaked overnight. Anywhere from 8 to 24 hours is great. 1 pound soaked in a brine that I made with 2 quarts of water and 1.5 tablespoons of table salt. That's 450 grams of beans, 1.9 kilograms of water, and 34 grams of salt. The other soaked in an equal amount of unsalted water. Then I simmered each batch until the beans were tender. You can see a lot of these unbrined beans ruptured and blew out, while the brined ones are intact but still super creamy. These are the beans that I want. You know what? It's time for our final salt magic trick, and a cup of coffee. Or maybe you prefer a cocktail? We humans are hardwired to recognize bitterness as a signal for danger. In plants, for example, bitter tasting compounds called alkaloids are chemical defenders meant to deter predators like us from eating it, and our taste receptors are extremely sensitive to it. That bitterness on its own is pretty unpleasant to most of us, but when we soften its edges with elements like sugar, fat, acidity, and salt, bitterness reads as pleasant depth and complexity. Salt doesn't just balance or cover up bitterness, it limits the ability for bitter messages to make it to our brains. And when that happens, we can taste other less prominent flavors. 2 of my favorite examples, coffee and cocktails. If you're a coffee drinker, try adding a pinch of salt to your morning cup, hot or iced, and give it a quick stir to dissolve the salt. Or if you're brewing a full pot, you can add 1/8 teaspoon of salt to the ground coffee. I also love what salt can do for a Negroni, the iconic Italian cocktail that features the citrusy bitterness of Campari. In this case, I like to make a saline solution so the salt is precisely measured and completely dissolved, and add it directly to the glass with a dropper. It's a 20% solution that you make by mixing 80 grams of water with 20 grams of salt. You stir it to dissolve the salt and add 1 to 3 drops per cocktail like this. This just makes the flavors pop, and it also balances out that bitter edge. You can also keep the bottle of saline solution right there with your other bar supplies, so you always have it at the ready, at the Negroni ready. You can also use the saline for your coffee. Wow, I have so many nice salty options to choose from, but I think I'm gonna stick with this Negroni because this is one of the finest ways to eat salt. Thank you so much for watching. I wanna know, what did I miss? Let me know your favorite lesser known uses for salt in the kitchen in the comments. And if you just learned a new trick from this video, I'd love to know which one or which ones. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and check out the link below to grab recipes from this episode and every episode of the show. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.